Imagine wandering the remote, silent depths of a vast forest, where every crunch of snow underfoot and every murmur in the dark feels charged with an unknown menace. Tonight, we delve into a true tale of psychological terror, a story woven from eerie footprints, inexplicable whispers, and the unseen eyes of the wilderness. This is not about overt danger, but about that creeping, heart-pounding uncertainty that leaves you questioning reality. Welcome to Nightmare Narratives. It all began on an early November morning that had the chill of impending winter and the promise of solitude. I had returned to my childhood home, a venerable brick house that stood at the very end of a nearly forgotten road in a small, secluded town. This house, with its time-worn red bricks and creaking wooden porches, had been passed down through the family, its character etched by decades of memories. Its location on the edge of the neighborhood, bordered on two sides by dense, untamed forest, always gave the impression that it was perched between two worlds, the familiar haven of home and the mysterious, ever-whispering woods. I had grown up brimming with the innocent curiosity of youth, roaming these woods and creating fantastical stories about gentle spirits and secret guardians. But as I returned as a young adult in my mid-20s, tired, burdened by stress, and in need of a retreat from the clamor of daily life, this same forest began to reveal a more ominous character. I yearned for escape and isolation, a way to detox from the recent turmoil and find solace in nature's quiet embrace. Yet even as I sought refuge among the towering pines and silent groves, an unsettling feeling slowly crept into my heart. That particular morning, the world was cloaked in a pale, wintry haze. I loaded my pickup truck with a thermos of strong coffee, a battered leather journal for fleeting thoughts, and a few other necessities that symbolized a temporary withdrawal from the chaos of modern living. The air was brisk, carrying with it the crisp tang of frost and the subtle odor of pine, a scent that usually soothed my soul, but that day seemed to carry hints of something else, an undercurrent of trepidation. I parked my truck in the narrow driveway that led directly to the back of the property. Every step I took on the fragile, snow-crusted pavement was accompanied by a loud crunch, a solitary rhythmic symphony that resonated in the stillness of the morning. As I neared the forest's edge, I noticed something out of place. In the midst of a pristine, white expanse lay a trail of delicate footprints. They were not the deep impressions one would expect from heavy boots stomping through fresh snow. Instead, they were light, almost ethereal, as if left by bare feet treading softly across a glassy surface. Curiosity mixed with an uneasy dread as I knelt beside the trail. The footprints began at the very line where the dense trees started and approached my truck, not following a meandering path, but rather cutting directly across the snow to my vehicle's driver's side door, where they abruptly ended. I picked up my phone to capture a quick photo, but nothing on the screen could explain the peculiarity of those marks. They appeared deliberate, almost ritualistic, and entirely unexpected for a quiet residence. My mind raced with questions. Who had left these marks? Had someone deliberately chosen to announce their presence on my doorstep, or was it a trick of nature that my anxious mind had conjured on a crisp, cold morning? As I absorbed the sight of those mysterious prints, a sense of isolation, reminiscent of old ghost tales and local legends, began to eclipse my thoughts. The woods behind me loomed large and secretive. Tall pines with twisted trunks and gnarled branches, their dark silhouettes merging with the fading light. The forest floor, layered with brittle snow and scattered needles, seemed to murmur with a language of its own, a language that I couldn't quite decipher. Every rustle, every gust of wind coursing between the trees, sounded like a whispered remark about secrets long kept in the depths of the forest. No sooner had I begun to piece together my thoughts than my phone vibrated against the fabric of my coat. Expecting perhaps a message from a friend, I was taken aback to see a series of text messages from an unknown number. The first message simply read, "How are the woods treating you?" immediately followed by another, "I see why you ventured here," and a subsequent one, "They know your secrets." Each message was brief yet delivered with an unnerving intimacy, as if the sender was right there in the silent forest with me. The casual tone of these texts only amplified the chill that slithered down my spine. I hesitated, unsure if I should respond. Every instinct within me screamed that no one should be so aware of my whereabouts without permission. The natural light dimmed gradually as the sun began to hide behind the dense evergreen canopy. The gentle glow that had greeted me that morning was now replaced by a deepening shadow that seemed to carry the weight of countless untold stories. The juxtaposition of the everyday with this unexplainable phenomenon was disconcerting. I attribute these impressions to some mischief of nature, a fleeting dreamlike moment that had slipped into reality. Yet deep down, I knew there was something profoundly unsettling at play. I stood for several long moments, examining the prints by the roadside, each delicate imprint etched in the snow a silent testimony to a presence unseen. The text messages kept arriving, each one adding more layers of ambiguity. There was no overt threat in their words. They were merely phrases that implied an intimate familiarity with my seclusion. "How are the woods treating you?" Was it a creep's casual inquiry, or the harbinger of an unspeakable secret? "I see why you ventured here." These messages, interspersed with intervals of chilling silence, merged together in my mind to create a tapestry of dread that was difficult to tear apart. Compelled by a mixture of curiosity and growing anxiety, I forced myself to step back from the safety of my truck's warmth and lean closer to the ominous boundary where the well-trodden snow met the dark, mysterious forest. I strained my ears for any sound beyond the usual whispers of the wind, but heard nothing more than the occasional soft sigh of nature. Yet, in that silence, I felt a multitude of unspoken presences, a subtle, pervasive awareness that I was intruding into a sacred space that did not welcome my intrusion lightly. Time seemed to stretch in slow motion. Every second, as I surveyed the delicate marks on the ground and the incessant digital alerts in my pocket, deepened my inner turmoil. I thought about the old stories my grandmother used to whisper on cold nights, tales of benevolent spirits and chimeric guardians that roamed the woods, protecting its mysteries from the prying eyes of the modern world. But today, those stories felt tainted, as if the protective force of the forest had been replaced by an inscrutable gaze that studied every footstep, every fleeting movement. I gingerly rose to my feet, while the eerie stillness of the forest seemed to compress around me. With trembling fingers, I attempted to document the scene by writing a few rapid notes in my journal, not trusting my memory to capture the raw, palpable terror of that moment. The text messages, which had initially startled me, now seemed like a part of a larger, unknowable narrative. A narrative in which my quiet camping trip had suddenly become the stage for an enigmatic interplay between the seen and unseen. Before retreating to the relative safety of my home, I took one last, lingering look at the trail of footprints. Their freshness, their deliberate precision, unsettled me in a way I could neither fully describe nor dismiss. The forest behind them, dark and fathomless, seemed to pulse with an almost human rhythm, a heartbeat that echoed the cadence of my own rising fear. I couldn't shake the sensation that somehow, in that labyrinth of ancient trees, my every thought was being meticulously observed and noted. Realizing that any moment could bring further inexplicable disturbances, I hurried back to my truck. Yet as I reached the cab, my mind replayed the uncanny series of events, a cascade of impressions that refused to be forgotten. Every step away from that silent, ominous block of woods was laced with the residue of unrelenting paranoia. The simplicity of a morning routine had transformed into an encounter with the unknowable depths of nature's dark heart. Inside my truck, still pulsing with adrenaline and shrouded in a disquieting haze of doubt, I kept glancing at my phone. Each new vibration sent my nerves into overdrive, as I anxiously awaited another message from that unknown sender. The messages eventually slowed, leaving me with nothing but the stark, unyielding silence of the deep woods. And yet, long after the phone went silent, the memory of those mysterious footprints and the haunting digital whispers refused to relent. I drove away, each mile pulling me farther from the forest, yet not from the overwhelming questions that now haunted my every thought. Was I being watched? Were those seemingly random marks a part of something larger, orchestrated by a presence much older than the trees themselves? I could not find solace in any rational explanation. The narrative of that morning was now entwined with an inexplicable sense of intrusion, a violation of the sanctity of solitude that I so desperately sought. In the quiet isolation that followed, as the din of modern life resumed its background hum, I found that the echoes of that morning would never fully fade. They lingered in the back of my mind like a half-remembered nightmare, a mystery that refused to be solved. The footprints in the snow, the cryptic texts, and the oppressive feeling of being observed had all combined to create a lingering, pervasive dread. A dread that only deepened the more I attempted to return to normalcy. I closed the truck door behind me and stepped inside, but the image of those silent prints and the unnervingly cryptic messages continued to haunt me. Their presence was a reminder that the woods, with their ancient trees and whispered secrets, held untold powers over the minds of those who dared to explore their depths. As I settled into the routine of the day, a part of me remained on high alert. The border between the safe world of habit and the profound terror of the unknown had been irrevocably blurred. If this passage has made your pulse quicken and left you yearning for more answers, please like and share this video. Your support fuels our quest into the heart of darkness. The oppressive silence of that autumn morning soon shifted into the unnerving intimacy of a long, uncertain night. As daylight faded into deepening twilight, I knew the forest held secrets that would soon unravel before me. Determined to find some rational answer to the mysterious footprints and cryptic messages, I set off along the left-hand trail that had split off from the original marks near my home. Every step I took carried me further into an ever-thickening darkness, where routine paths became uncharted corridors in a labyrinth of twisted trees and echoing uncertainties. At first the trail seemed almost inviting, a narrow, well-worn path bordered by a light dusting of snow that illuminated the forest floor in soft, luminescent white. But as I advanced, the scenery changed. The trees grew denser, and the path narrowed to a barely perceptible track among thick undergrowth and tangled roots. The hush of nature was profound. Nothing stirred aside from the faint whisper of leaves rustling in a gentle, inexorable wind and the muted crunch of my footsteps. It was as if I had crossed a threshold into a different realm where time slowed and every sound held hidden significance. I clutched my heavy-duty flashlight, its beam flickering slightly against the encroaching darkness. My mind was beset by doubts. Was this path truly natural, or had it been laid out deliberately by an unseen force? I recalled the delicate prints I had seen back at the driveway, a trail so carefully formed it defied a random explanation. Now, as I walked deeper, those impressions seemed to guide my journey deeper into the wilderness, where the boundary between man and nature blurred into something almost ethereal. Every once in a while, my phone would vibrate, pulling me momentarily from my reverie. The messages had grown sporadic, delivered in intervals that seemed calculated to heighten my nerves. One message read simply, "Follow your intuition," and another, "The trail holds more than footprints." I couldn't help but feel that the forest itself was communicating with me, telling me a story that transcended my ordinary understanding. The digital texts, accompanied by the crude marks on the frosty ground, painted the picture of a presence that was not overtly aggressive, but whose mere existence unsettled every fiber of my being. As the darkness deepened, I found myself venturing into a part of the forest where the trees formed a near impenetrable canopy overhead, their intertwined branches blotting out even the faint stars above. Here, the path was barely discernible, and the familiar sounds of nature diminished to an eerie quiet. I paused frequently, scanning the shadows for movement, yet saw nothing more than fleeting shapes that vanished as soon as I focused on them. Time lost its meaning. Minutes stretched into what felt like endless hours, punctuated only by the periodic hum of my own anxiety and the soft, inexplicable sounds from somewhere among the trees. I began to notice subtle changes. The footprints, once distinct and isolated, now reappeared intermittently, as if a second set of delicate impressions was following alongside mine. These new tracks were not as defined. They seemed almost to be part of the falling snow, ephemeral and ghost-like. They vanished behind outcroppings of rock and beneath thick, arching boughs, only to re-emerge in another inexplicable nook of the forest. There were moments when I caught sight of reflections in the darkened surface of frozen puddles. For a fleeting heartbeat, I thought I saw a figure standing in the background, a shape so indistinct that I couldn't be sure if it was real or merely a trick of the light. My pulse raced, and I strained my eyes in vain to distinguish a genuine presence from a mere shadow play. The forest, it seemed, knew how to toy with my perception, turning simple reflections into instruments of disquiet. The overwhelming sense of being observed was persistent, prickling against my skin like the soft caress of an invisible hand. I wondered, almost desperately, if the mysterious messages and tracks were actually being orchestrated by someone or something who knew my every move. At one point, I stopped to catch my breath near an ancient oak, its gnarled trunk bearing scars of time and weather. In the silence, my eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I noticed a subtle change. There, etched into the bark as if by design, were symbols that echoed the patterns of the footprints I had seen earlier. They weren't letters or numerals, but abstract marks that evoked a sense of ritual or secret communication. I could feel a shiver of recognition mixed with terror, an intuitive warning that I was treading a path not meant for casual wanderers. Pressing onward, I reached a small clearing where the trees opened up slightly, offering an unobstructed view of the night sky, now scattered with timid stars. In the center of this clearing, I discovered the remnants of what appeared to be an old campfire, a circle of weathered stones, and a scattering of ash that suggested someone had been here before, not long ago. The fire's embers had long since died, leaving behind only the ghost of warmth amid the biting cold of the night. I couldn't shake the thought that perhaps this spot was a point of convergence, a place where others, much like me, had sought refuge or answers amid the forest's silent watch. While I stood there lost in my thoughts, my phone vibrated again. The new message was terse, almost challenging. "Look closer. What do you see?" I aimed my flashlight around the clearing, searching for any sign of life. In the far corner, half hidden by a copse of slender birches, I saw it. A flicker of light that couldn't be explained by the natural luminescence of the stars or the moon. It was as if a small, deliberate beacon had been ignited there, pulsing briefly before fading out as quickly as it appeared. Every instinct in me screamed to investigate, yet the deep-rooted fear of the unknown kept me rooted to that spot. The light was not merely illumination, it was a call, a subtle invitation to step further into uncertainty. Unable to ignore the compelling lure, I cautiously made my way toward that transient glimmer. Each step was measured, my eyes darting among the trees as I navigated the uneven ground. The sound of my heartbeat pounded loudly in my ears, syncing with the slow, deliberate crunch of snow underfoot. The branches overhead seemed to lean in closer, as if curious about my intrusion. The beacon of light reappeared intermittently, as though beckoning me forward, only to dissolve into the surrounding darkness before I could grasp its source. In that strange interplay of darkness and light, I felt the unmistakable presence of something both otherworldly and intimately connected to this forest. As I neared the spot where the light had appeared, I became aware of another unsettling detail. Scattered around a large, flat stone were small tokens, objects that appeared almost ceremonial in nature. There were smooth, shapeless stones, arranged in a peculiar pattern, strands of what might have been beads or natural fibers, intertwined with dried leaves, and a single, almost delicate feather laid atop the formation. These items, seemingly placed with deliberate intention, added a new layer of mystery. Were they meant as offerings? Tokens of a silent pact between an ancient force and those intrigued enough to wander these paths? I couldn't tell, but the thought filled me with a quiet dread, as if I had inadvertently interrupted a ritual older and far stranger than anything I could comprehend. The night pressed on, and the forest's atmosphere became even more disconcerting. The earlier digital messages had slowed, replaced by long periods of eerie stillness where only the natural sounds of the woodland prevailed. Yet I was no less unsettled by the absence of further text alerts. Instead, every whisper of the wind and every subtle movement in the periphery of my vision took on a foreboding significance. A persistent feeling of being shadowed persisted, not by a person, but by an intangible force that was both alien and deeply familiar. It was a profound, gnawing sensation that made me question whether the forest had always possessed this ineffable presence, one that had latched onto me the moment I first set foot on that remote path. Driven by a need to both understand and escape the grip of the intangible, I began to document everything. I scribbled frantic notes into my journal as I walked, detailing every unusual footprint, every unaccounted for light, and every inexplicable symbol etched into the trees. I tried to keep a calm exterior, though inside I was a roiling storm of anxiety. The act of writing served as both a means to preserve these unsettling observations and as a small defiance against the forces that sought to envelop me. I recorded the exact times of each message, the order in which the cryptic phrases had arrived, and the precise formation of the tokens I discovered. With each entry my hands trembled, and the words bled together into a chronicle of a night that felt preordained yet relentlessly uncertain. The deeper I ventured into the forest, the more the boundaries of familiar time and space disintegrated. In one moment, I caught sight of a clearing bathed in a spectral glow, and in the next, I was retracing my steps along a path that seemed to have shifted ever so slightly. It was as though the forest itself was reconfiguring, a subtle reordering of nature's own design, to ensure that I remained perpetually disoriented. Every so often, I would stop and peer into the darkness, as if expecting the elusive figure hinted at by the earlier reflection to emerge again. Yet, there was nothing tangible, only the soft brush of the wind through pine needles and the uncanny rustle of leaves that whispered unspeakable secrets. In the midst of this surreal wandering, a particularly chilling moment arrived. I approached a narrow bend in the path, where the trees arched overhead so tightly that the night seemed to press in on me from all sides. Here the air was thick with an almost electric tension, and even my own breath sounded too loud in the oppressive quiet. I raised my flashlight and noticed subtle, almost calligraphic markings on one of the trunks. These weren't naturally occurring, but rather appeared as if deliberately inscribed, lines and curves that formed a pattern beyond mere coincidence. For an instant, I felt as though the tree were confessing its hidden truths, narrating a story written in the language of the forest. The feeling was not of overt menace, but of a slow, creeping dread, a realization that I was intruding on a world far older and far more complex than my simple, rational mind could ever grasp. As I lingered at that bend, I paused to gather my swirling thoughts, each one punctuated by the steady pounding of my heart. In that space between certainty and doubt, the concept of destiny slithered into my mind. Did these signs, the footsteps, the intricate symbols, the tokens of ritual, foretell a convergence of fates? Was I meant to witness these strange occurrences, or was I merely a passive observer caught in an elaborate game played by forces beyond control? Questions without answers circled my mind, each query deepening the enigma of my solitary journey on this treacherous path. A cold, almost imperceptible rain began to fall, as if the forest itself were weeping for the unknown souls it had claimed. The droplets glistened on the leaves and collected in tiny rivulets along the smooth surface of stones. I took shelter beneath a massive cedar whose broad boughs formed a natural canopy, and in that brief respite I allowed my eyes to adjust to the soft illumination of the moon hidden behind intermittent veils of cloud. Even in that moment of temporary reprieve, I could not shake the unsettling feeling that I was constantly under surveillance. Every rustle of foliage, every distant creak, became a signal, a communication from an unseen caretaker of this dark wilderness. The night had long stretched into a tapestry of whispers and half-seen images. I resumed my journey, driven less by a need to uncover every secret than by a quiet resignation to follow where the forest led. My footsteps found an irregular cadence, interspersed with moments of stillness as I pondered each new clue left behind by an elusive presence. The messages on my phone, which had paused for long stretches, began to return sporadically, each one a soft reminder that I was not alone. What do you see now? And the forest reveals itself slowly to those who seek its truth. They did not demand immediate response. In their measured cadence lay a calm, deliberate tone that contrasted sharply with my frantic inner turmoil. Gradually, the trail began to reassert itself as a guide, marked now by subtle differences in the texture of the snow and the deliberate scattering of natural tokens. It was as if the forest recognized my determination and, in its own inscrutable way, was offering me a glimpse into its ancient secret heart. As I approached an area where the trees parted to reveal a small, mirror-like pond, I paused for an extended moment. The surface of the pond reflected the barely visible outlines of the surrounding woods, creating a surreal double-world effect where the real and the spectral merged. I crouched down beside the water, mesmerized by the slow ripple that disturbed the reflection with every faint gust of wind. It felt like a portal to another realm, one where the known laws of nature bent into the whispers of forgotten lore. I felt compelled to record this moment in my journal, my hands trembling as I described the interplay of light and shadow, reflection and reality. It was here, I realized, that every element, the mysterious footprints, the recurring messages, and the silent, watchful trees, had coalesced into a single haunting tableau. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes not only on my back, but within the very depths of the water. A profound loneliness gnawed at me, intermingling with a curious sense of communion with the natural, yet enigmatic forces that governed this place. I began to understand that the forest's silence was not a void, but a language, a continuous cryptic dialogue that I was only beginning to decipher. As the night advanced into the realm of deep, undisturbed darkness, I crept away from the reflective pond and continued along a newly converging path. Every step was accompanied by an ever-growing tension, a mixture of cautious optimism that some truth might be revealed, and the paralyzing fear of uncovering something too profound for the human mind to bear. The path twisted and turned, sometimes leading me forward, sometimes circling back upon itself in ways that tested my grasp on direction and time. I could no longer tell if I was moving in circles or truly making any progress through the tangled woods. Yet amidst this disorientation, there was an undercurrent of purpose, a silent urging to allow the forest to tell me its secrets, even if the price was a slow disintegration of all comforting certainties. Eventually, the sounds around me began to change. Familiar creaks of wood and the occasional snap of a twig gave way to a more spectral composition, a soft rhythmic humming that seemed to resonate from the very ground beneath my feet. I listened intently, trying to discern its origin, but the source remained elusive. The humming did not instill terror in the abrupt, explosive way that sudden shocks do. Instead, it seeped into my consciousness gradually, wrapping around my thoughts like a persistent melody from a forgotten dream. In that hum lay the notion of continuity, of an ancient presence that persisted long before I had ever set foot in those woods, and that perhaps might persist far beyond my departure. As I trudged deeper into this realm of half-light and muted chorus, I began to consciously accept that the forest was not my enemy, but a silent interlocutor, a keeper of dreams, memories and secrets too old to be remembered in words. Every element along the path, the delicate recurring footprints, the cryptic phrases arriving at intervals on my phone, the artisanal arrangement of small tokens, served as a fragment of a mosaic painting that I could neither complete nor fully comprehend. All I could do was absorb each detail, imprinting them into my mind as testament to this uncanny night. I recorded every sensation, every flicker of light or shadow, in the hope that one day they might converge into a story comprehensible to both the conscious mind and the deeper, instinctive parts of myself. And yet, within that acceptance lay the most profound terror of all. The realization that the forest and its mysterious messenger were inviting me to confront something deep within my own soul, a reflection of my hidden fears, the discomfort with solitude, and the endless uncertainty of what lies beyond the threshold of human understanding. I continued on, feeling that this unspoken invitation was both a benediction and a warning. I had become part of the forest narrative, a reluctant participant in a dialogue that spanned centuries. By the time I emerged from one particularly narrow corridor of trees, a place where the wind whispered like a secret through tightly bunched leaves, I felt that the true nature of the trail was almost within reach. I resolved to follow it unquestioningly, not knowing whether the next sign would definitively reveal an answer or plunge me further into the abyss of unknown terror. The forest was imposing, magnificent, and terrifying in its calm indifference, and I was caught in the delicate balance between the desire to learn its ancient truths and the instinct to flee its unyielding embrace. And so, as I continued my cautious journey along this ever-shifting path, every step brought with it a mingling of wonder and mounting dread. I wondered aloud if I was nearing a crossroads of fate or simply delving into a perpetual loop of uncertainty with no exit. In that persistent, unnerving questioning lay the essence of the night, a personal confrontation with the enigma of nature, a challenge issued not in words, but in the silent language of existence itself. What do you think lies at the end of this mysterious trail? Drop a comment below and share your theories about these unexplained signs and whispered messages. Your insights may help unlock this enigma as we continue our journey into the heart of the unknown. The night had long deepened into an endless, ink-black canvas, and I found myself caught between the lure of the familiar and the ceaseless pull of that unsettling forest. As I struggled to retrace my steps along the twisting, nearly forgotten trail, every footstep felt like a quiet surrender to a force far older and more potent than my own apprehensions. The world around me had shrunk to a narrow strip of trembling starlight, the muffled sound of my heartbeat, and the constant oppressive sensation that unseen eyes were meticulously cataloging every movement I made. I began to question whether the path I followed was indeed one the forest had cleared for me, or if it was merely an illusion, a trick of the psyche wrought by isolation and the heavy influence of an all-consuming dread. There were times when the path seemed to unravel into a labyrinth of intersecting tracks, each fork whispering possibilities both wondrous and terrifying. Minutes melted into hours as I staggered through the realm of half-light, where the air itself seemed to condense into a palpable presence, a hush that swallowed even the sound of my labored breaths. At one point, a dense thicket of ancient pines loomed ahead, their gnarled trunks standing like silent sentinels guarding the darkest secrets of the woodland. I hesitated there, staring into the murky depths beyond, where the interplay of shadow and dim light evoked visions of realms on the brink of our own. It was in this heavy moment of inaction that the forest spoke, though not in words, but through vibrations in the very ground beneath my feet. A low, resonant hum began to reverberate up through the soil, a sound so deeply embedded in the pulse of the earth that it seemed as though the trees themselves were sighing in mournful solidarity. The sound wrapped itself around me, inviting me to yield to the heavy gravity of the forest's ageless sorrow. Unable to resist the magnetic pull of the unknown, I pressed forward. My surroundings shifted subtly as I crossed beneath swaths of intertwined branches and fell upon small clearings, broken only by the frost-coated remains of old camp remnants, the evidence of others who, like me, had sought communion with the woodland's mysterious heartbeat. In one such clearing, I discovered a wooden bench half consumed by wild ivy and thyme. It beckoned as if offering a momentary reprieve from the relentless anxiety that had coiled within me. I paused there, exhausted yet fueled by an enigmatic compulsion to remain and listen to the soft murmur of the wind. to the distant rustle that might have been a whisper of hope or a prelude to more profound mysteries. The bench became a silent confidant, its creaks and groans echoing my internal disquiet. As I sat there, shrouded in the spectral glow of an indifferent moon, my mind began to churn with 1,000 thoughts. Were these moments of solitude a blessing or a forbidden glimpse into the raw, untamed truth of our existence? 1,000 questions arose, and with each unanswered query, the tension inside of me thickened like the heavy fog that now slithered across the forest floor. I resumed my journey, driven by an odd mixture of dread and an irresistible yearning for resolution. Every step was a reluctant surrender to uncertainty, and as the forest seemed to close in around me, it was as if the very fabric of reality wavered with each passing moment. My feet carried me along a path that bent and twisted in unnatural curves. There were stretches where I felt compelled to follow the subtle luminescence of mineral deposits on the stones, and other moments when I simply let the forest's quiet murmur guide my way into further obscurity. With every step, each rustle of fallen needles, the unspoken promise that something profound lay just beyond my grasp, I felt that my life was becoming irrevocably intertwined with the towering trees and the ancient silence they commanded. I soon found myself at the precipice of a clearing. This, once again, was not an open space bathed in the familiar light of stars, but rather a void bordered by the forbidding silhouettes of towering firs and the flicker of lingering shadows. In the center of the clearing, a circular stone platform lay untouched, as if chiseled into place eons ago. Its surface was neatly worn smooth by the passage of countless unseen footsteps. The platform radiated a gentle warmth, an anomaly amid the frigid surroundings, and it seemed to pulse in time with my quickening heart. The air around it vibrated with quiet energy, as though the clearing were a sanctum dedicated to secrets that had no name. Drawn inexplicably towards the stone circle, I stepped onto the platform. The ground underfoot felt oddly familiar, as if I had been here before in another time, or perhaps in a dream. A delicate interplay of light and shadow danced across the surface, conjuring the impression of ancient markings that told of long-forgotten rites, a ritualistic language spoken in symbols instead of words. I knelt before the stones, running my fingers along the smooth, weathered surfaces, searching for a message or a clue to the enigma that had brought me into this spectral sanctuary. There was no overt explanation, no simple narrative to be found, only an ineffable sense that I had been chosen, in some quiet way, to witness this communion between nature and a deeper truth that defied human logic. As I sat in that hallowed silence, the minutes stretched into what felt like lifetimes. I began to understand that the forest was not an adversary, but a mirror, a reflection of the multifaceted layers of my own inner world. Every uncertainty and every unexplained sign was a fragment of my own subconscious, projected outward into this endless wilderness. The messages that had haunted my phone, the delicate footprints, the intricate tokens along the way, all these fragments merged in this moment into a singular, profound truth. The lines between my reality and the vast, ineffable spirit of the forest were dissolving. I could feel my fears, my hopes, and my dreams intermingling with the primordial pulse of the woodland in a way that rendered all distinctions obsolete. Then, as if stirred by my quiet revelation, the forest divulged one final spectral secret. From the darkness at the edge of the clearing, a soft glow emerged, emanating from behind a grand ancient cedar whose bark was etched with the silent testimony of centuries. The light was ephemeral, an undulating shimmer that played across the rough surface of the trunk, as if painting a mural of shifting images. I walked closer, my heart an uncontrollable drum in the silence, my mind balancing on the precipice between disbelief and the overwhelming certainty of what I was witnessing. The cedar exuded an aura of ancient wisdom, its presence both domineering and tender, as if it held the memories of every soul that had ever stepped into the forest. With each step closer to the cedar, the soft luminescence grew steadier, bathing the tree in an ethereal radiance that accentuated the timeless grooves along its trunk. In that luminous glow, I perceived subtle engravings, patterns that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of life and loss, hope and despair. It was as if the tree was recounting a saga of ages past, a tale without words that resonated in every whisper of the wind and every rustle of its needles. I stood there, transfixed by the silent poetry of the moment, knowing that I was merely a transient participant in a ritual that spanned millennia. Yet, as the minutes passed and the glow slowly dimmed, I realized that the moment was slipping away like smoke in the cold night air. I rose from the stone platform with a heart both heavy and enlightened. My final steps through the clearing were marked by a profound sadness, a melancholic acceptance that not every riddle would be unraveled, no matter how deeply one sought to understand the mysteries of the natural world. The forest, in its infinite expanse and layered silence, was a repository for enigmas too vast to be contained by mortal minds. I began my cautious journey back along the path that I had taken so reluctantly earlier in the night. Every step felt weighted by the echoes of the forest's unspoken legacy, a journey that challenged the boundaries between self and the ancient whispers of nature. As I moved away from the clearing, the frozen silence of the surrounding woods enshrouded me once more, and the haunting chorus of my own thoughts mingled with the rustle of unseen leaves. The path gradually narrowed, and the comforting facade of my memories retreated, leaving in its place the bittersweet aftertaste of answers that, while incomplete, had transformed me in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. The drive back to civilization was surreal. I merged onto a quiet road shrouded in darkness, yet even as the concrete and streetlights reclaimed the landscape, I couldn't escape the lingering sensation of being marked by that night. The memory of each subtle message, every delicate footprint, and the silent language of the forest permeated my mind. In moments of deep reflection, I wondered if the forest would ever truly release its hold on me, or if I had, by stepping into its embrace, become part of its ageless lore. The unresolved mystery was a tapestry woven into the fabric of my thoughts, a paradoxical blend of terror and transcendence. In the stillness of early morning light, as I finally reached my destination in the relative safety of everyday life, I carried with me the echo of that night. I had witnessed no overt savagery, no physical conflict, yet the psychological imprint, an ineffable intertwining of solitude, fear, and revelation, was indelible. The forest had shared its secrets, not with a shout or a clash of tangible danger, but in whispers that transcended the limits of understanding. It was a gentle yet relentless reminder that some mysteries in life are meant to remain unresolved, that sometimes the pull of the unknown is the most potent force of all. Now, as I pen these final words with trembling resolve, I remain ever aware that the shadows of that night linger still. The fragments of the forest's message, its soft, mesmerizing cadence and its lingering dread are a permanent testament to a journey that, for me, will never truly end. I look back one more time in my mind's eye and see an endless, spectral forest where each step forward was a delicate dance with the unknown. The experience redefined my concept of safety and fear. leaving me with the bittersweet realization that the boundaries between comfort and terror are often as thin as the mist over a moonlit clearing. If this final chapter has left you entranced by its blend of beauty and dread, please subscribe to Nightmare Narratives and hit the bell icon. Join us as we continue to explore the eerie and the enigmatic, diving deep into stories that blur the lines between reality and the haunting unknown.